Olá, eu sou Samir Oliveira, sou jornalista, coordenador de comunicação da Fundação Lauro Campos e Marielle Franco e ativista pela causa palestina. E hoje nós estamos aqui no programa Luta Sem Fronteiras, do canal da Fundação Lauro Campos e Marielle Franco no YouTube, recebendo o doutor professor Nur Masalha, que é membro do Centro de Estudos Palestinos da Universidade de Londres, está no Brasil, lançando o seu mais novo livro em português, A Palestina através dos Milênios. Nós vamos conversar um pouco com o Dr. Nur Masalha sobre a sua obra em relação à Palestina. So, Dr. Nur, thank you for being here, for receiving us. And I understand this is your third book published in Brazil. I want to ask you about the relationship you have with the Brazilian readers and the importance of bringing the knowledge about Palestine and the knowledge produced by Palestinian intellectuals to Brazil.
Thank you so much. I was in Sao Paulo a few years ago and I spoke at Sao Paulo University. And when I came here the first time, I did not have a single book in Portuguese. And now I'm coming for the second time and I have 3 books. So this sounds quite an amazing thing. This is a turning point. It gives me great pride actually to have 3 books suddenly in Portuguese. And I'm here to spread the message. I'm here to encourage people reading these 3 books. The 3 books are slightly different from each other. The first book was published 33 years ago when I was a young academic, and it was about the Palestinian Nakba, what happened in 1948. This year we have the 77th anniversary of the Nakba. The 2 other books were published more recently, and they are slightly different. They are about the long history of Palestine, the thousands of year history. People don't realize that Palestine is an old country, one of the oldest countries in the world, and its cities among the oldest cities in the world. And in the Middle Ages, people used to think that Palestine and Jerusalem is the center of the world. If we look at maps in Europe in the Middle Ages, they used to think that Palestine is the center of the world. It's a small country, relatively speaking, but it's a very important country, religiously, culturally, and in many ways. So I'm here really to encourage people to read the books, and I'm hoping also to promote Palestine studies in Brazil and to advance. So this is a good beginning. This is a good start for me.
Yeah, and in your work, you always present a lot of evidence, historical evidence, to support your facts, and in these facts they dismantle Zionist myths, and these myths that Zionism builds along the years, they are almost entirely based on the Bible. I want you to talk about the role the Bible plays in Zionism historiography.
Look, I come from the Galilee, and I come from a place near Nazareth, the city where Jesus was born. And Jesus was born in Roman Palestine under the Romans. It was called Palestine. It wasn't called Israel. There was no mention of Israel at the time. Jesus spoke Aramaic. This was the language of the population in the Galilee, not Hebrew. He spoke Aramaic, and Aramaic is very close to Arabic, where I come from. So I come from an area where Christians and Muslims have been living together for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I come from an area where Christians were the first Christians after Jesus. These Arab Christians. So this is my connection. I'm a Muslim, but this is my connection to Christianity. That I grew up with Christianity. We were surrounded by monasteries. We lived together. I always saw Jesus as universal person, someone with a universal message, someone who spoke the truth. And this had a huge influence on me. The idea that history has to be based on truth, not on fictions, not on lies, not on propaganda. It's not about politics, it's about the facts, it's about the truth. I think this is one of the things which I took from the message of Jesus of Nazareth. Speaking the truth will set us free. The truth is very powerful. Speaking truth to power, whoever in power, even someone in the White House, you have to speak truth to him. So truth is the heart of my work, is the heart of my history, facts, truth, evident. Try to prove it. It's not about actually propaganda, it's not about politics, it's about the facts of Palestine, that Palestine existed for thousands and thousands of years, and it was on every single map for many, many years. And the Bible, I think when we come to the Bible, we need to separate between the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Bible was written by many people across many centuries. It wasn't written by a single person. And it's not the Bible. The problem is not the Bible. The problem is the way some people use the Bible and misuse the Bible and abuse the Bible. It's not the Bible itself. There's nothing wrong with the Bible. There's wrong with the way some people use the Bible politically to try to dominate and to try to colonize. The use of the Bible to colonize and oppress and justify apartheid, this is the worst thing I can imagine. So it's not the Bible, it's the misuse of the Bible, it's the abuse of the Bible, which some Zionists and some Christian Zionists are doing here. So I think we mustn't really blame the Bible as such. The Bible is a complex book. It's written by many people. It's got the New Testament. It's got the story of Jesus. It's got a universal message of love your neighbor. Don't colonize your neighbor. Don't oppress him. Don't impose apartheid. Some people are using the Bible to try to colonize, to justify racism and apartheid. That's the problem with the Bible. It's the weaponization of the Bible to try to beat people on the head. This is what worries me. The Bible itself doesn't worry me. It's got many things in it. It's got many good things in it. It's got some universal messages and universal ideas, and it's got prophetic traditions. It's got many things which can inspire us. But it's that we use the political use of the Bible to try to suppress and hate other people. That's the problem.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this, about evangelical Zionism, Christian Zionism. Are you aware that here in Brazil they are a very strong political presence? It's quite common to see here in Brazil at far-right demonstrations, flags of Israel. And what are your views on this kind of Zionism, this evangelical Zionism, and its strength, given that Jesus was Palestine, as you said, and the Palestinians were the first Christians?
Mm-hmm. Well, Christian Zionism is not a religion, it's an ideology, it's a political ideology. I separate between religion and political ideologies. Religion, all religion, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they have political messages. And at the heart, if you want to reduce the heart of Christianity, is about peace. I think Pope Francis actually embodied that, Christianity, and we saw it in action recently. And I think we need to mention him. That's the message of Christianity. I don't know much about Christian Zionism here, or evangelical Zionism, but I know a lot about the Christian Zionist lobby in the US. And that lobby in the US has an incredibly dangerous ideology. It's an ideology which promotes wars. It's an ideology which expects some kind of Armageddon, some kind of destructive war. It's almost the opposite of Christianity, which is about peace, which is about living together, which is about accepting your neighbor. This Christian Zionism in the US, the way I understand it, which promotes Armageddon, almost a nuclear war. Well, how many Jews you expect actually to survive a nuclear war? How many Arabs? How many Middle Eastern will survive these wars? I mean, this sounds like a horrendous, terrible scenarios. So this political ideology, which supports Israeli apartheid and the colonization of Palestine from the river to the sea, and also trying to wipe out the reality of the country. The fact that this country was inhabited by indigenous people and indigenous Christianity. Christian Zionism doesn't even pay attention to early Christians or to Palestinian Christians. If you want the message of Christianity, you go and ask Palestinian Christians. Christian Zionism ignores them completely. It supports some kind of fictional vision, some kind of horrible scenarios. Christian Zionism is really fabrication. It's a political ideology of fabrication. It's full of lies. It's full of propaganda. It supports extreme right-wing government in Israel, extremist government, one of the most extremist government in the history of Israel. Christian Zionism, it's not about the interests of Israel. A lot of Israelis actually don't like Christian Zionism. A lot of Israelis are rational people. They see Christian Zionism as a strange kind of political ideology which supports war, supports expansion, endless wars. Is this the interest of Jews? I want to separate Judaism from Zionism, by the way, because I think Judaism and Zionism are not the same thing. Judaism is a legitimate religion. We respect Judaism. Jews lived among us, with us, for hundreds of years. Zionism is a settler colonial movement, came from Europe in the last 100 years. This is a big difference between Zionism. So Christian Zionism supports Zionism, but doesn't support Jews. This is not the interest of Jews, not in Brazil and not in Israel. I'm sure many Jews in Israel would like to have some kind of peace. Not the Israeli government, which is Christian Zionism supports extremism. An Israeli ideology which is based on endless wars, endless expansions, endless domination. Where would this end? Is this in the interest of people, Palestinians and Israelis? I think Christian Zionism is an ideology of hate. It's an ideology which promotes hate, and it promotes conflict, and it promotes constant wars and also horrible scenarios. It's almost the opposite of the message of Jesus.
Sure. And in your book, 4,000 years, about the 4,000 years of history in Palestine, you prove that the word Palestine has always been there, carved in ancient coins, present nation maps. And I think Zionism has had a lot of victories, political and military victories, but the one thing they haven't had yet is to erase the power of the word Palestine. I want you to talk about the significance of this word as an affirming way of that the Palestinian people exist and they're entitled to sovereignty and liberty. How do you view this question, this presence of the word Palestine through the years, through the millennia?
Really, if you want to look at the most important authors we have come across from antiquity, poets, historians, playwrights, you can take Herodotus, 2,500 years ago. He came to a country called Palestine, and he mentions it in his famous book 6 times. And he talks about the cities of Palestine. He doesn't mention Israel at all. 2,500 years ago. He talks about a country between Phoenicia, Lebanon, modern Lebanon, and Egypt. He described that country in details. He described its religion, its cities, its custom. He also talks about male circumcisions, how local Palestinians, he calls them Palestinians, circumcised boys. And he says that circumcision was taken from Egypt. Today, people still circumcise little babies. It just shows the continuity between Herodotus, the most famous Greek historians in antiquity, and in the classical world also. And that's 2,500 years ago. Let me take you 500 years after Ovid, the Roman poet Ovid, wrote about Palestinian wine. Ovid, one of the 3 most important Roman poets at the time, he wrote about Palestinian wine, a very special wine, one of the best wine he thought he had ever drunk. Ovid, everybody teaches Ovid at university. Everybody knows the books of Ovid. Everybody has read about Palestinian wine of Ovid. Let me take you to William Shakespeare. 400 years ago, Shakespeare wrote a play called Othello. Very famous play. It used to be played in London, and he played to audiences. Othello was set in Venice, and Othello is the man of a Muslim commander employed by the Venetian army who falls in love with a lady called Desdemona from Venice. And Shakespeare writes in this famous play, which was played to audiences, that Desdemona would walk barefoot from Venice to Palestine in order to meet Othello. She was so in love with Othello. Now Shakespeare, 400 years ago, described a country called Palestine. He doesn't even need to explain the location of this country. Everyone in the audience, ordinary people, simple people, knew where is Palestine. That's Shakespeare. That's William Shakespeare. 100 years later, the most famous British historian, Edward Gibbons, talks about Palestine is the most famous country in the world. He says, it's so beautiful, it's so important. Everyone wanted it because its land is fertile, its cities are rich. This is Edward Gibbon in the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. This is the most important British historians of the modern period. These books, the plays, Ovid, this classical heritage is in the British Library, in the Library of Congress. Everyone can read it. Palestine was so famous because most important authors were talking about it. Every single map produced in the last 2,000 years, every single had the word Palestine on it. Every single map produced in Europe, every single map produced Arab geographers, Arab historians talked about Palestine. It's such a small country, but such an important country. Palestine and the Holy Land went hand in hand. Palestine, the Holy Land, Jerusalem, repeatedly. The repetition of the term Palestine by so many famous people made Palestine such a central to collective memory. Until 1948, until the Zionists took 1948 and they tried to delete Palestine from international maps and replace it with the word Israel. Yeah. Until 1940, the British called it Palestine. The Zionists who came to that country, they came to Palestine. The early Zionist settlers came to Palestine. The currency was called Palestine. The currency coined by, in the Middle Ages, the Islamic currency had the name Palestine on it. And so you can't really destroy that. Of course, the Zionists are trying to do it. And Google Maps are also trying to help them doing it. And that's the sad thing about it. But anyone who can dig a little bit, and you can see the mountains of evidence, the facts, the evidence, the documents, the archaeology of some of the oldest cities in the world. Gaza City is a 5,000-year-old city. Jericho City is 12,000 years. These cities are so old, so ancient, so famous. And that reality which in books, in documents, where are you going to start destroying it? You would have to destroy the British Library and the Library of Congress in order to destroy Palestine itself. It's just crazy, these people. What they're doing are crazy. I know what they're trying to erase, the heritage of Palestine, the culture of Palestine, but the concept of Palestine will never be erased. It will always be there. It will always be available to people to read about and to write about. And basically, I just bring the facts. I really bring the facts. I avoid the politics here. I mean, these books are really based on facts. Show me the facts. Israel is only about 77 years old. Before that, it was called Palestine. Everyone called it Palestine. The Jewish archives of Cairo in the Middle Ages, the Gnezar archives, called it Palestine. Jewish rabbis called it Palestine. And the Israelis know that. They lie, they fabricate, they invent, and the Christian Zionists here support them and support this fabrication. These people are science fiction. This is not science fact. I write science facts. They talk about science fiction. Jesus was born in Roman Palestine because the Roman and the Palestinian called it Palestine. And the Jews at the time, Josephus, the famous Jewish historian at the time, called it Palestine. Why can't they read Josephus? Very famous Jewish historian at the time, he called it Palestine. For him, it was a country with a mixed population, with Jews and Samaritan and then Christians and then Arabs in the south. It was always a mix. multicultural, multi-religious country. It was never actually a single kind of entity or religion. It was never Jewish, or just Christian, or just Muslim. It was always multiple. And this is Palestine. That's the message of Palestine. It's a country which was open to everybody. Its identity is open. I'm trying to show in these books the identity of Palestine was an open identity. It included everybody. We had Arab Jews who were Palestinians. So when I talk about Jesus being a Palestinian, Jesus came up with a religion, new religion, but he was born in Palestine. Because he was born in Palestine, he's a Palestinian. It doesn't matter whether he was a Jew originally or not a Jew. But some people think he was a Samaritan. The New Testament says, is he Samaritan, is he Jewish? This is what matters. It doesn't matter, actually. What matters is that he was born and brought up in Roman Palestine, and his descendants are still living in Palestine. The early Palestinians are still, we can see them living in Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem. Why don't we talk to them about their identity? And this does not exclude Jews. I don't want to exclude Jews from Palestine. Jews were part of Palestine. Unlike the Christian Zionists, I accept that Jews are part of the history of that country. They think they know the interests of Jews, but they really don't know the interest, and they don't know the history, and they're not interested in the history. They're not interested in facts. They're not interested in evidence. They're not interested in truth. Jesus wanted us to speak the truth. Speak the truth, my friend. And they speak lies and propaganda, these people.
Yeah, and Palestine's history has been shaped through the years by the influence and even the dominance of several powers and empires like the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, the British, and now, of course, the Zionism allied with imperialism. And how does this Zionism dominance that is taking place today can be related or not to the other powers that once ruled the Palestine?
The question is, how do we read the history of Palestine? Do we read the history of Palestine as a history of empires, chronologies of empire, or do we look at the voice of the indigenous people of Palestine, regardless of their religion? And I think my books are about the voices of the indigenous people, how the indigenous people actually treat different powers and different empires, and how they survive and how they flourish and how they build cities. And I think we need to look at the voice of the indigenous people, not just the colonial voice or the imperial voice. I don't write imperial history. I understand empires and this and that, but Zionism was slightly different from these empires. These empires, they did not try to wipe out the population. Zionism is a settler colonial movement, eliminationist, eliminating things, replacing things. The empires wanted to exploit, wanted to rule, wanted to dominate. Zionists wanted to clear out. That's the difference between Zionism and some of these empires. The Ottoman empires dominated the region, but the indigenous population continued to cultivate the land, continued to pay taxes, continued to work in local government. There was also some kind of autonomy for the local people. And until Zionism, I think these empires, they wanted to dominate, to exploit. They didn't want to replace anybody. They didn't want to clear people. They didn't want to expel the Palestinians. For the first time in history, we have a movement which is expulsionist, which is elimination. It's about elimination. Gaza has to be eliminated. Palestinians have to be eliminated. Half of the Palestinians are refugees, and half of them were expelled in 1948. And this is why I explain in this book, Expulsion of the Palestinians, that Zionism Zionism as a settler colonial movement brought something even more dangerous than these old empires. I'm not in favor of empires, by the way. I don't justify empires. I don't think we need empires. I think we need people to run their own life. We need people to have their own voice. We need autonomy and independence for all people in the world. And we don't need empires. I think the world of empires should be kind of rest with history. But I think there is something different about Zionism, which is about the elimination of the natives. the expulsion of the natives. And that's slightly different from the British and from the Ottoman and from the Islamic empires which came.
Yeah, and talking about elimination, Zionism got to eliminate cultural and even geographical references of the indigenous people, like the names of the cities, villages, even mountains. Can we say that today for Palestinian people, the words are also a form of resistance? Like, for example, when we insist on calling West Bank by its name and not by Judea and Samaria, for example.
That's right, yeah. I think Zionism has tried to replace all the names. 5,000 new Israeli names or Hebrew names or Zionist names were invented for every single site, every single village. 5,000 names. Never in the history of that country new 5,000 names were invented in order to replace the indigenous. But the indigenous people still use their indigenous names for villages and towns and cities and mountains and valleys and not just in the West Bank, by the way, also in the Galilee. People are still using names like Asqalan instead of Ashkelon. Palestinian refugees in Gaza talk about Asqalan. I think Palestinians even in the diaspora sometimes call themselves Bisan or Jaffa after these names. They're trying to keep that collective memory. I think Palestinian collective memory is very powerful and is very alive, and it's alive with the third generation of refugees. So it's that collective memory which is so powerful. It's a form of resistance also. We're not going to go. We're not going to disappear. We are here to stay. We will stay. Also, we will return as a people. So we're not here to expel anybody. Unlike the Zionists, we're not there to expel anybody. But our right to our homeland, our right to return, our right to keep our culture. The Zionists really, when they expelled 1948, when they expelled also, I call it a form of cultural genocide, this kind of elimination of indigenous culture. It was a form of culture. It's like the old colonial genocide 200, 300 years ago, which we had it in Latin America, in some Latin America, and in North America, and in Australia with the Aborigines. The Zionists doing what people did 200-300 years ago. We thought that history is gone. We thought the history of eliminating the natives is gone. But they're doing it in the 21st century. That's the shocking things about Zionism. In the 21st century, they think they can expel 2 million Palestinians from Gaza. They think they can finish the job. They started the job in 1948, the Nakba, and they talk about the new Nakba now, the Israeli ministers. It's very shocking. It is something people in Brazil can't understand. Indigenous people in Latin America, they are integrated and they thrive. And no one is talking about eliminating indigenous people anymore in Latin America, in Australia, in New Zealand, the Maoris. Everybody's trying to recognize that indigenous people did suffer and they have rights to lands in Australia. So they're making progress in Australia. They made progress in New Zealand, European settlers. But in the 21st century, the Zionists trying to do what people did 200 years ago, 300 years ago, going back to barbarism. This is really barbarism at its worst. And we can see this barbarism in Gaza. One of the most barbaric wars being conducted, a criminal war. Under international law, this is a criminal war. That barbarism, it's hard to imagine it's happening in the 21st century in front of our eyes. On the screen, in our bedrooms, in our television, we can see how the genocide is being documented in the 21st century. This is what's shocking about it. And what's shocking about it that what happened to Jews in Europe, it's actually can't find its way to Zionism in Palestine. Yeah. The way Jews actually were treated so badly. And the Palestinians, Gaza is like living in a big concentration camps. It's like big Auschwitz going on in Gaza. Terrible. It was terrible in the Second World War, and we should always remember and condemn the Holocaust and this and that. But it's happening in front of our eyes. How can go on. It's very shocking to me as a Palestinian I have documented 1948, and I thought 1948 also was behind us. I thought this was 77 years ago. This is an experience my grandfather and my father had. I didn't think I would have the same kind of experience of a new Nakba.
Yeah.
And it's happening now. And it's very traumatizing. It's very shocking what's happening now. And I think that's why I wanted to talk about this book, which I published 33 years ago, which was translated. And I hope, people in Brazil and people in Latin America, it's available in Spanish, will read it. But I also see the history of Palestine as a history of human beings. It's not, we're part of a human history, and, our message should always be a universal message.
Yeah. So, Professor, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us and for being in Brazil. I hope this interview will help in spreading the word of your incredible work and your books about the very rich and expressive history of Palestine in order to build a better future. Thank you so much, Professor.
Well, thank you all, Samir, and thank you, friends, actually, and hope to see you again.